Hello, beautiful people. Welcome back to English Listening Tips. I'm your host, Emma, and I'm thrilled you've joined me today. If you're new here, welcome. And if you're a regular listener, you know I've got something special for you today. Today's episode is called The Only English Video You Will Ever Need. And I know that sounds like a bold claim, but I truly believe the vocabulary and phrases we're covering today will transform your English speaking abilities. Learning a language isn't just about memorizing grammar rules or random word lists. It's about understanding how native speakers actually communicate in real life. And that's exactly what we're focusing on today, the expressions and vocabulary that will help you sound natural and confident. So grab something to take notes with, because we're about to dive into the most useful English phrases and vocabulary, with clear explanations of how and when to use them. Let's begin with phrases that help you start and maintain conversations. These are absolute gold for sounding natural. When meeting someone new, instead of just saying, "Nice to meet you," try, "It's great to finally meet you." This adds warmth and enthusiasm to your greeting. The word finally suggests you've been looking forward to this meeting, which makes the other person feel valued. Another great opener is, "What brings you here today?" This is much more engaging than simply asking, "Why are you here?" Let me explain why. "What brings you" is a gentler, more inviting way to ask about someone's purpose or reason. It sounds conversational rather than interrogative. Compare. "Why are you at this conference?" Which might sound a bit direct or even confrontational, versus "What brings you to this conference?" which feels welcoming and genuinely curious. For maintaining conversation, one of my favorite phrases is, "That reminds me of." This is a natural way to contribute your own story or experience without awkwardly changing the subject. Let me give you an example of how this works in practice. Imagine someone is telling you about their vacation in Spain. You could say, "That reminds me of when I visited Barcelona last year. The architecture was incredible." This keeps the conversation flowing naturally while allowing you to participate actively. Another key phrase for maintaining conversations is, "How do you feel about?" This is more thoughtful than just asking, "What do you think?" because it invites the person to share emotions and personal perspectives, not just opinions. It often leads to deeper, more meaningful exchanges. Now, one of the biggest challenges when speaking a foreign language is needing time to think. Everyone experiences this, even advanced speakers. The trick is knowing how to buy time elegantly. One of the most versatile phrases for this is, "That's an interesting question." Why does this work so well? First, it compliments the speaker by acknowledging their question was thought-provoking. Second, it gives you valuable seconds to formulate your response while sounding engaged rather than confused. Let me show you how this works. If someone asks you a challenging question like, "What do you think will happen with artificial intelligence in the next decade?" Instead of freezing or saying, you can respond, "That's an interesting question about AI. I think the most important consideration is." See how that buys you time while keeping you in control of the conversation? Another invaluable time buyer is, "Well, the way I see it is." This phrase not only gives you thinking time, but also frames what follows as your personal perspective. This is particularly useful when discussing potentially controversial topics because it signals that you're offering an opinion, not stating an absolute fact. When you didn't understand something, rather than repeatedly saying, "What?" or "Can you repeat that?" which can make conversations awkward, try, "Could you clarify what you mean by?" This pinpoints exactly what confused you and shows you were listening carefully to the rest of what they said. These phrases aren't just fillers. They're strategic communication tools that native speakers use constantly. Practice them until they become automatic responses. Now let's talk about expressing opinions. Basic English might limit you to saying things are good or bad, but with a richer vocabulary, you can express precisely how you feel. Instead of saying something is very good, try using exceptional. But it's not just about using a fancier word, it's about understanding the subtle differences in meaning. Exceptional specifically implies something that's an exception to the norm. It stands out because it's rare or unusual in its quality. Let me show you the difference in context. "The food at that restaurant is very good" gives basic information. But "the food at that restaurant is exceptional" tells the listener this is a rare, outstanding experience worth seeking out. For expressing agreement, "I couldn't agree more" is much stronger than simply saying, "I agree." When you say, "I couldn't agree more," you're emphasizing that your agreement is at the maximum possible level. There's no way you could agree any stronger. This phrase shows enthusiasm and complete alignment with the other person's view. Notice how different these sound. I agree that environmental protection is important, versus I couldn't agree more that environmental protection is important. The second version shows passionate support for the idea. For polite disagreement, I see your point, but is invaluable. This phrase acknowledges that you've listened and understood, which keeps the conversation respectful before introducing your alternative perspective. This is much more effective than starting with, "You're wrong" or "I disagree," which can make people defensive. The magic of "I see your point, but" is that it creates a bridge between viewpoints rather than a wall. It signals that this is a discussion, not an argument, and helps maintain positive communication even when opinions differ. Phrasal verbs are combinations of verbs and particles that often have meanings completely different from the original verb. They're used constantly by native speakers, and understanding them is crucial for natural-sounding English. Let's look at figure out, which means to understand or solve something through thought or effort. What makes this phrasal verb tricky is that neither figure nor out individually suggests this meaning. Let me show you how it works in context. Instead of saying, "I need to understand this problem," a native speaker would say, "I need to figure out this problem." Or rather than, "Did you understand why she was upset?" they might ask, "Did you figure out why she was upset?" What makes phrasal verbs challenging is that they're often idiomatic. Their meaning isn't obvious from the individual words. Take put up with, which means to tolerate something negative. If you analyze the individual words, it's hard to see how put, up, and with combine to mean tolerate. In real conversation, you might hear, "I can't put up with this noise anymore," instead of, "I can't tolerate this noise anymore." The phrasal verb version sounds more natural and conversational. Here's my tip for mastering phrasal verbs. Don't try to learn them all at once. Instead, focus on the most common ones and learn them in context with example sentences. Try to use at least one new phrasal verb in conversation each day. Being able to express emotions accurately makes your English more expressive and nuanced. Let's explore the spectrum of emotional vocabulary beyond just happy and sad. Consider the different levels of happiness. Content, pleased, delighted, thrilled, over the moon, and ecstatic. Each of these words represents a different intensity of positive emotion. Content represents basic satisfaction. You're not excited, but you feel good. It's like the pleasant feeling after a nice meal. I'm content with my current job means you're satisfied but not necessarily enthusiastic about it. Thrilled, on the other hand, represents excitement combined with happiness. If you say, "I'm thrilled about my promotion," it communicates not just happiness but also excitement and anticipation. Over the moon is an idiom that expresses extreme happiness. It creates a vivid image of happiness so intense it could launch you beyond the moon. You might say, when she found out she was going to be a grandmother, she was over the moon. Understanding these nuances helps you communicate your exact emotional state. It's the difference between saying, "I'm happy about the news," and "I'm ecstatic about the news." The second version communicates a much more intense reaction. Next time you want to express how you feel, try reaching for these more specific emotional terms. They'll help others understand exactly what you're experiencing. Now let's cover essential business English vocabulary that will help you sound professional in any work environment. In meetings, you'll often hear the phrase, "take the lead on." This means to be the main person responsible for a project or task. For example, Sarah will take the lead on the marketing campaign means Sarah will be the primary person managing that project. What makes this phrase powerful is that it communicates both responsibility and leadership in a concise way. Rather than saying Sarah will be responsible for managing and directing the marketing campaign, the more natural "Sarah will take the lead on the marketing campaign" is efficient and clear. Another common business expression is touch base, which means to briefly check in with someone. You might say, "Let's touch base next week about the project status." This is more casual and friendly than saying, "Let's schedule a meeting to discuss progress." The beauty of touch base is that it implies a quick, informal check-in rather than a formal meeting. It suggests maintaining connection without requiring significant time commitment. For emails, "I'm writing to follow up on" is a professional way to reference a previous conversation or request. Instead of sounding demanding with, "You haven't responded to my last email," you could write, "I'm writing to follow up on our discussion last week about the client proposal." This phrase is effective because it's assertive without being aggressive. It reminds the recipient about previous communication while maintaining a professional, courteous tone. Linking words and phrases are essential for connecting your ideas smoothly and making your English sound more sophisticated. Let's explore how to use them effectively. The phrase furthermore is more formal than also or and. It adds weight to your additional point. Compare, the project is over budget, also we're behind schedule, versus the project is over budget. Furthermore, we're behind schedule. The second version emphasizes that the scheduling issue is another serious concern. Building on the first problem. When contrasting ideas, however, signals a shift to an opposing viewpoint. What makes however powerful is its versatility. It can be placed at the beginning, middle, or end of a sentence. The design is beautiful, however, it's too expensive to produce. Or the design is beautiful, it is, however, too expensive to produce. Or even the design is beautiful, it's too expensive to produce, however. Each placement creates a slightly different emphasis. For giving examples, for instance, is more formal than, for example. You might say, many factors contribute to climate change. For instance, deforestation reduces the Earth's capacity to absorb carbon dioxide. This phrase signals that you're about to illustrate your point with a specific case. What makes these linking phrases so valuable is that they guide your listener through your thought process. They act like signposts, indicating whether you're adding information, contrasting ideas, giving examples, or concluding your thoughts. Idioms and expressions make your English sound natural and native-like. Let's explore some common ones and understand how they're actually used. In the nick of time means just before it's too late. This idiom creates a vivid image of narrowly avoiding a missed opportunity or negative outcome. For example, the ambulance arrived in the nick of time, 5 minutes later would have been too late. What makes idioms like this powerful is their ability to add color and emotion to your speech. Saying, the ambulance arrived just before it was too late is factual, but the ambulance arrived in the nick of time adds drama and relief to the narrative. In business contexts, think outside the box encourages creative thinking beyond conventional boundaries. The box represents normal thinking patterns or standard procedures. You might hear, we need to think outside the box if we want to stay ahead of our competitors. One of my favorite idioms is blessing in disguise, which refers to something that seems bad at first but turns out to be beneficial. For instance, losing my job was actually a blessing in disguise because it led me to start my own business, which I love. The power of blessing in disguise is that it reframes negative experiences in a positive light. It communicates resilience and optimism in the face of challenges. When learning idioms, focus on understanding the feeling and situation they convey, rather than trying to translate them literally. Try to learn them in context through stories or examples, which makes them much easier to remember and use correctly. We've covered so many essential vocabulary items and phrases today, from conversation starters and opinion expressions to business vocabulary and idioms. But more importantly, we've explored how and when to use them effectively. Remember, becoming fluent in English isn't just about knowing words, it's about understanding the subtle differences between similar expressions and choosing the right one for each situation. It's this nuance that will take your English from good to truly impressive. I recommend practicing these phrases in real conversations. Start with just 2 or 3 new expressions each week and use them until they become natural. Quality is more important than quantity when it comes to vocabulary learning. If you found this helpful, please give the video a thumbs up and subscribe to English Easy Listening for more in-depth language content every week. What vocabulary or phrases would you like me to explain in future episodes? Let me know in the comments below. Until next time, this is Emma reminding you that with the right words and phrases and understanding how to use them, you can express anything in English. Keep learning, keep speaking, and watch how quickly your confidence grows. Bye for now.